You're listening to The Dating Den with dating and relationship badass and best-selling author Marni Batista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important dating, sex, and relationship issues you want to know about. So if you're ready for true talk that's authentic and unfiltered, and you're not afraid to be called out on your stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
The Dating Den with Alex Howard. The one type of woman men can't resist. Darling ladies, welcome into the Dating Den. I am super excited for you today because you know how I love bringing you the best. You know how I love men with a British accent because my husband is one of them. And you know how I love really smart men. And I found one for you. I found you, Alex Howard. He is the founder and chairman of the Optimum Health Clinic, which is one of the world's leading integrative medicine clinics with patients in 50 plus countries. Amazing. He is the creator of the Therapeutic Coaching Methodology. And since March 2020, I wonder what else happened in March 2020. Alex has been documenting his therapeutic work with real life patients via his In Therapy with Alex Howard YouTube series. What a perfect time to create that. He has created some of the largest online conferences in the health and mind-body markets, including the Fatigue Super Conference. I'm sure you all should go to that. And the Trauma and Mind-Body Super Conference. And most recently, we're super excited about the Relationship Super Conference. And there's been over 350,000 people that have been able to be gifted with the knowledge of Alex and the work that he does. So welcome. I'm super happy that you're here.
That was a great intro.
Well,
Thank you,
you know.
Thank you.
Okay, so I like to play the game that I really suck at, which is where in the UK are you from? Because when I married my husband, I learned that every little town has a different accent. Where are you from?
I don't think my English accent is as exciting as it could be. I grew up in Surrey, which is it's what they call one of the home counties, one of the kind of districts just southeast of London.
Well, guess what? That's where my husband is from.
Come on.
No, he's from Surrey. I was like, his accent is sounding very, very familiar to me.
I mean, how deep do we go? Where from Surrey? Where in Surrey was your husband from?
Well, see, I don't know that answer. I went there once. It was a little Tudor house. It looked English.
That's very funny.
They had,
you know
what?
Sorry, when I think Americans think of England, they probably think of Surrey. It's very pretty. It's very quaint. But I think, like a lot of people that grow up in pretty quaint places, you kind of grow up there wishing you were somewhere more exciting. And of course, growing up loving American culture and American movies and all the bands I love are from America. Of course, I wish I'd grown up in America. But
that's so funny. Well, we'll have to have another conversation about that because that's what happened with my husband. And then he's like here and he's like, it's not that great. All right. So let's talk about relationships. So, I mean, you grew up in Surrey. I don't know what happened between then and now, but how did this passion for understanding deeper relationships, how did that evolve for you? What's your story?
Probably like a lot of people that are doing work in this space, I wasn't sat there in a career guidance session in my teens going, when I get older, I'd love to do work in relationships. I think like a lot of people, my interest in the space really was a result of my own misery and inability to have a happy and lasting relationships. And to give a little bit of the context, I suffered from chronic fatigue syndrome for 7 years as a teenager, and that catalyzed a big internal journey in the world of health and psychology and spirituality. And I went on this, the first couple of years of that journey was incredibly difficult. I was very severely unwell. And I spent 5 years on this very proactive healing journey. And I saw dozens of practitioners and did thousands of hours of meditation and yoga and all these different things. And I really discovered along that journey that my first true love in life was psychology. And I trained to become a therapist. I did a degree in psychology. And so in my mid-20s, I found myself in a situation where in many ways, I had the dream. I was very successful in the career that I was doing. I had a clinic on Harley Street in London, which is the sort of the most prestigious place that it's sort of overtaken by dodgy plastic surgeons these days. But back in those days, it was a very prestigious place to be. And I had this penthouse apartment and this sports car and all of these things that I dreamed that I wanted. But I was utterly miserable when it came to the world of relationships. And I was in a relationship for 18 months with someone I'd been working with, and that relationship broke up, and I didn't realize it at the time. It took me probably 5 years from that point to realize, but I was brokenhearted at the end of this relationship. And I ended up going from one relationship to another, none of these relationships lasting more than 3 months. In fact, I remember once saying, if I could just get to 3 months in a relationship, I'd have turned a corner. And I'll maybe come back to the danger of that statement in a moment. But I remember the early days of the Optimum Health Clinic, and we had this training center where every couple of months we'd have our staff in for training sessions. And every couple of months, I was in a different relationship. And initially, having been the kid, the kind of the fat, kind of most bullied kid in school who could never get a girlfriend, who I remember was sort of the laughing stock. I remember once there was a girl that I liked, and I was far too afraid to approach her myself. So I got a seeming mutual friend I bought some chocolates and wrote this letter. And I was trying to be super romantic. And then I know he's going to help sort of tell her, and it's going to be this whole thing. And then a couple of days later, I see them snogging with the box of chocolates.
You're like Love Island reality. Like, it was happening for you.
So that sort of gives you a sort of taste of my teenage years dating. So here I'm in my mid-20s, and I'm dating these beautiful, really great women. I just can't have a lasting relationship. And I'm at work every few months in these meetings, and it goes from being, I'm kind of proud of the fact that I'm having these different sort of dating experiences, to then sort of being a bit shy about it, to then just being mortified of the fact that I'm this successful, in many ways, therapist, but I can't have a lasting relationship. And it's like, I think there's often a point where we come out of a long-term relationship and dating's really healthy. Like it was a necessary phase, but I wanted something more, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't make it happen. And it then sort of reached a climax where it was my 29th birthday. And I remember it vividly. I was in a restaurant in Camden Town, just down the road from where our offices are. And I was with a bunch of the team from work. There was maybe 15 of us in this restaurant. And it's supposed to be a kind of, big, happy occasion. And I just recently, a couple of weeks earlier, had ended the latest in this sort of list of relationships. And it had been a bit of a tricky separation. And it turned out in hindsight that there was some mental health perhaps issues with this person. But I get this text message that she's tried to take her life.
Oh, and no.
Not ultimately caused by the end of the relationship, but the end of this relationship's been a factor in that. And I, at this point, as someone who's really learned over the years through psychology and self-development that one has to take responsibility, and one has to always try and to mine their life experiences for what are the lessons, what can I learn from this. And what I came to really realize, and has become a really important, I guess, part of my message these days in my work, is that how I was showing up in relationship was as the person that I thought I needed to be attractive, to be liked, to be loved. And this sort of idealized self that I had, particularly as the kid at school who was mercilessly bullied and couldn't get a girlfriend, and I had all these ideas of the person I thought I should be and I needed to be, and this was the place from which I was having relationships. And that's great for a first date. It's pretty good for a second date. But after a while, what starts to happen is inevitably we can't sustain that image. And on the other side, the part of the problem was I had an idea of the person that I thought I needed to be with, to be happy, to be. So I was coming from an inauthentic place, and often I was probably attracting people that were either coming from an inauthentic place, or at least I was projecting that onto them. And really this kind of 4 or 5 year process of this just sort of endless relationship dramas that climaxed in this very painful personal experience that's really what got my attention.
Yeah,
I was I got to do something different.
Well, yeah, and I think this is really interesting too, because there's that there's the come from, right? And I think a lot of our listeners can identify with this. And I had that even when I got divorced. I was like overweight. I felt like I never like got the guy. And, and then I had this compensation time right after I got divorced where I was just trying to be enough, because I got married to the first guy who asked me when I was like 22, right? And then I was trying to do that same thing, right? Like I was trying to now I'm enough. Well, am I enough now? Now I've got the super hot guy. Now I've got the super rich guy, whatever it is, right? And when we have that come from of trying to heal or overcompensate for things that happen when we're younger, it just keeps playing itself out over and over again. So I think that's number one. And then number two is, which I think our listeners can relate to, is it looks all great on the outside and it doesn't matter in the end because we're laying in bed at night. The woman walked out the door, Alex, she was super hot. You're laying there after 5 or 7 years of this. What are you thinking about yourself?
Right. And in fact, I'll share a little story that I don't think I've shared on a podcast before, but I guess saying as we're getting into the meat of the issue, one of the things that happened was I reached a point where I was like, I just don't seem to be able to have a deep and lasting relationship, but I want to have intimacy. I want to have physical connection in my life. So I ended up with a couple of women, which actually are wonderful women, but they weren't the one that I wanted to spend my life with. That having a sexual relationship that was not really going anywhere, and it in a sense it was satisfying in a very basic way. But in time, it actually became almost a form of self-abuse because I was reminding myself with a taste of what I really wanted, but it wasn't what I really wanted. And I remember one of these sort of, I guess, friends with benefits is one of the phrases.
Right, yeah.
But one of these relationships, I remember one time we'd been together and it was like 1:00 in the morning and I was driving across London in my banged up old Ford Escort, having sold my sports car, trying to prove to myself I could be more authentic and I didn't need to have all the kind of traffic. So I was driving across London and, the night, it was getting a bit, how the kind of raucous Friday night of London was calming and the sort of street cleaners were out and I was driving across and I was crying and I was just like, I just want something more. There has to be something more than this. And it wasn't that I didn't like the person. It wasn't that I didn't respect the person. I didn't enjoy being with the person. It wasn't the relationship that I wanted. And actually, I was driving back that night, and that was when I made to myself the commitment. I said, I took down all my dating profiles, and that's not to say there's anything wrong with online dating. Some of my dearest friends have met people that way. It absolutely has its place. It's just at that point in my life, the way that I was using it had become unhealthy. And I was driving across London. I just thought, I'm smart enough. I think I'm smart enough that I must be able to find another way to do this. And so I took down all the dating profiles and I just decided I'm not going to be physically intimate with someone again until I actually want to have a relationship with this person. And I actually feel grown up in myself enough to have a relationship with this person. And it's funny how these things work. I've skipped a bit of the story that maybe we'll come back to in a minute, but I skipped the bit which helped me get to that moment. But on the other side of that, I was like, who do I just like? Because the problem was most of my relationships were either people that I met through online dating or my friends were people that I worked with. And that's great. And I still, I've got 60 staff in the companies. I love the people I work with, but it's not always healthy to be spending your social life with the same people that you're working with.
Right.
And I was like, who do I just want to hang out with? Like, if I'm not having a relationship with someone and I'm not like, who do I just want to spend time with? And the kind of joke of the story is that my now wife was the person that I just wanted to hang out with. And she'd been the person that I've been telling all my relationship dramas to.
Oh,
and she'd been
that's so
through the whole thing.
amazing. I love that.
And when we started getting together, I'd made this commitment to myself that I wasn't going to try and be this idealized perfect self. I was just going to be myself. So it was bumbling and fumbling. I remember the first time we held hands and it was really awkward. Like, it was the most awkward thing. And yeah, I was able to do it from a different place. And I said a bit earlier, Marni, that if I'd say to myself, if I could just get to 3 months. So here's the funny bit of the story.
Yeah.
when I met it was something felt different very quickly. And a few months into the relationship, my wife said to me, I'm not saying I want to have kids with you, but I need to be really clear with you that I ended the previous relationship of a number of years because the guy wasn't ready to have kids. And I'm 30 something and I want to have a family. Not saying it's you. I just need you to know that I'm not going to spend several years hanging out with someone in a relationship who's not going to get to that place.
Good for her, by the way, right?
I really respected her.
That's amazing. Yeah, I was like, I would totally coach someone to do the same.
Totally, right? And the way she did it was really cool. It was really non-threatening. It was just like, I'm just going to tell you my truth, and and you do with it what you're going to do with it. So I totally freaked out, at least internally. I was like, oh my God. And so here's the funny thing. We were being actually very careful in terms of contraception. We got some bad advice. Long story cut short, our first daughter was due exactly on the 1-year anniversary of when we first got together, which means that my wife had fallen pregnant exactly 3 months after we first got together. So here's me saying I can just get to 3 months, and it's like I got to 3 months, and that's how it went down.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing! That's such a great story. So let me ask you this. So I think what you've illustrated here. So first of all, I think it's so important. Like, ladies, men go through this shit too. I mean, I think, I can imagine the woman who is on the other side of that night when you're driving through London, where she's like, why can't Alex commit to me? What's wrong with me? Why is he calling me for this, but he doesn't want more? And I think it's really important to have compassion and understanding for that guy that's on the other end of the relationships, ladies, that you're in, where he's a quality guy, but he's not emotionally available. So I really appreciate your vulnerability to really get what that's like on the other side for the ladies that are listening. And then you talk, go ahead.
And also, just jump in, Marni. Also, I wasn't the right guy for her either.
Yeah.
And even if she maybe thought I was, I don't know what she thought at the time. She may not even thought I was, but even if she thought I was, looking at how my life's unfolded and hers, we were never right. We had chemistry and we had friendship, but we just weren't right. And, I'm happy to say she's been married for years with several kids, and we're not close, but we're friends on Facebook, and her life seems awesome. It's just sometimes it's just in our heart we know that person's not the right person, and it takes courage to act on that.
Well, it does, and I am a fan of the best worst thing that happens, right? And so if this woman is in your life, so you could have that moment, so that you could ultimately be with your wife and have the children that you have. I mean, you're like, thank you, Facebook friend. So let me ask you about this. You talk about masks that block emotional intimacy, right? And you've shared so many of those that you noticed in your own journey. Can you sort of say more about these and what women, because I think women don't realize that they're wearing masks or that they have these masks that make them emotionally unavailable.
Yeah. And I think, we all do this a bit differently, but there are definitely patterns. There are definitely, trends, let's say, that run through us. So these can be masks I need to be seen as being independent. Mm-hmm. I need to be someone that can stand on my own 2 feet. I don't need anyone else. And maybe that's because in childhood, we were loved when we were strong, but not when we were weak. And so what we learned was that I need to be seen, even if I don't feel it, I need to be seen that way. Another mask might be the mask of the achiever, that I need to be seen to be successful. I need to be seen to always have the answers, to always be confident. Another mask might be I need to be seen to be the helper, that mm-hmm. I'm always there for other people, that I'm always putting other people's needs before my own. There's many different examples of these, but these are masks that we wear and we do this for different reasons, right? We do this sometimes because we fear if we don't wear these masks, we won't be safe. So it can be a safety thing that I need to be perceived to be in control and be strong. Otherwise, other people are going to hurt me and wound me. Or it might be that I need to wear these masks to be loved. That if I'm not seen as being this strong, independent person, then people will reject me and not love me. The problem is that when we relate through masks, those masks that might at one point in our life have kept us safe and have protected us, the walls that kept us safe become the prison that keeps us trapped. And so, or the wall that keeps the world out. And so if intimacy, and this is not my phrase, but whoever came up with it, it's a great one. Intimacy is into me see.
Yeah.
If we want to be intimate with somebody, we have to take down the masks, and we have to let them relate to us in our authentic self, in our vulnerabilities, in our, in many ways, the things that particularly those of us that have, I'm sure many people listening have been, even if they're not in one right now, and it's what their heart's desires to be in at different points in their life where they have been in long-term relationship, or the friends that they feel the closest with, or the family that they most enjoy being with. It's not that our vulnerabilities or our kind of imperfections in those relationships we're loved in spite of them. Often we're loved because of them. That actually those places in ourselves that we might feel the most like we need to hide, the more we let people see those, that's where the real intimacy happens. That's where the real connection happens. And so if we have these ideas of these masks that I need to wear in the world to be safe, to be loved, that particularly when we go into vulnerable places, and going dating is pretty much the most vulnerable thing that we do in our lives, because we're going like, am I attracted to this person? Is this person attracted to me? Do they like me? Am I saying the right thing? That the more vulnerable we feel, the more closely we cling to the masks to try and keep us safe. The problem is, the more we cling to them, the bigger wall there is to intimacy.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I was at a retreat over the last weekend with some of my clients, and we did this appreciation experience, and these women were sharing with the other ladies at the end, like their appreciation. And it's this vulnerable experience, right? After, creating intimacy over 3 days. And the way that these women lit up, like the joy and authenticity, it was like the masks were off. And I looked at some of these ladies, and it was almost like I saw a face I'd never seen, right? Because their hearts were so open. And I think that that's what happens, is that we don't realize that we're wearing a mask because we're so used to it. We don't understand that there's this joy or this light underneath that is in the illusion of safety. But what you said is so amazing, that it's not really safe, is it? When you're in that place of hiding.
And that's the thing. It's like, the more we use these masks off, in a sense, to put it slightly differently, we put on these masks when we're younger, there's amazing brilliance in the coping strategies we develop as children. Like I was just filming before this podcast a session of In Therapy, and was working with a lady who, one of the real traumas of childhood was that it was always about her mum, and her feelings were just not really, only were they not welcome, but actually her feelings were a threat to her mum. So she learned that she just can't have. So there's this whole history of sadness and hurt that's just been repressed, that we're just starting to open up and to start to explore, to give voice to. She used this beautiful metaphor. We were looking at the resistance to feeling that emotion, and she was like, it's like this kind of black smoke that comes up that gets in the way, and it obscures my light. That was so beautiful, that it's like it obscures her light coming out into the world. And that's the challenge, that the brilliance of these patterns that we develop in childhood, that we need to survive in childhood. But then the real trauma of our childhoods, not actually what happened in childhood, it's the way that we perpetuate the suffering by continuing those patterns.
Yeah.
So what was necessary for survival now becomes the source of our suffering. And the unpacking and the curiosity to open up and to make sense of that is where we can then start to learn to live without those masks. And, go back to when I met my wife, I mentioned that, we were, she was the person that I was talking to about my various relationship dramas. And I assumed that she would have no interest in me because she was just hearing about all the ways I was failing in my life. So I was like, this is like going to be a non-starter, but I really enjoyed the friendship. And we met on a retreat, on a kind of meditation spiritual retreat. And so she's hearing all this stuff, and she's seeing me in small groups, like kind of crying my eyes out, and I'm just like, this is never going to be anything happening with this. She's never going to be interested in me in that way. But the thing was, our connection was based upon that much more vulnerable, intimate place. And then the funny thing was, I was really committed to working on this pattern of how I would kind of show up in this idealized self. And as we started to get together, it would start to surface sometimes. And it was like, she had this sort of just distaste of it. And so I was really confused, because I was used to being a bit of a show off and wanting people to kind of see things that I'd achieved or things that I was good at. And that just wasn't what attracted her to me. And in a sense, I had to learn how to stay in connection in that more vulnerable place.
Yeah, and that's so true. When we are ourselves, I call it summer camp syndrome. Like, you go to summer camp and you're just yourself, and you're like, all these boys used to like me at summer camp. And then I come back into my hometown, and suddenly it was like I was a different person. Like, why isn't anyone getting me? Why isn't this working? And or someone will say, oh, when I go traveling, right? Like I meet people, but then I come home and there's nobody, right? And it's like there are these parts of ourselves that we show when we feel safe, or we don't feel like there's a threat, and then people want to connect with us. It's like, how do we integrate those? So how do we get free? I mean, obviously there's no 1, 2, 3, 3 easy steps, but how do we start to break free from these masks? What are some steps people can take?
Yeah. So I think there's actually probably two pieces to this, right? It's like, how do we in of ourselves break free from those masks? But also when we're dating, how do we help others to be free? And not in a way where we start calling them out on their stuff. That's not my recommendation for dating. But in a sense, how do we build the safety with another? Because in a sense, the more pressure someone's under, the more likely they are to wear these masks and layer up these masks. And so in a sense, if what we're saying is true intimacy is into me, see that you want to build a depth of connection in relationship with someone, you need to be able to create a level of safety that it's almost like the quicker they take off their masks and the quicker you take off your masks, you've actually got an idea of where this relationship may or may not go. And that's why sometimes, it's almost the quicker you get through if you want a long-term relationship, it's almost the faster you get through the honeymoon period, the better, because you've actually then got an idea of what is there beyond that initial chemistry and attraction that might be there. So I think in terms of ourselves, part of it is awareness. One of the phrases I often use is, if you can see it, you don't have to be it. If you can see that you're putting up those masks, in the moment of seeing that, that's an invitation to perhaps to be brave and perhaps not put on that mask. Like, if you're used to, let's say that your pattern is that you need to be seen as strong and independent, and you're out having a date with someone, and you notice that the way you're answering questions is often a way of demonstrating your independence, or that you're wanting to be seen to be kind of strong and take control, that what would happen if you were to soften perhaps that grip of that pattern and just be a little bit more curious of what happens if you relate from a more open place in that moment? I think, though, the real key to the deeper work, let's say, to really getting free of these masks, is to do the work on what is it that we're trying to hide. So I mentioned that there's this idealized self, this person that we believe that we need to be safe, to be loved, to be accepted. There's also this place inside of all of us that I call the collapsed self, which is all of the emotions, the traumas, the things that have happened in our past that we've not dealt with. And the metaphor that I use is a little bit like having a black sack on our shoulder. And each time we have an experience that we don't process, we take it and we put it in the black sack. And for many of us, that black sack's got big and it's got heavy, and it's emotionally and physically draining to carry it around. And the more that we pack into it, the more we're also at danger of the kind of the lid coming off and the stuff bursting out. Like we're driving round the roundabout, I don't know. It's just you don't get so many roundabouts in America, but you know what I mean by roundabout.
Yeah, no, I do. We do. I do. I just went on a road trip in a 36-foot recreational vehicle, tried driving around a roundabout in a small town with that. That's what I'm thinking about when you're talking about getting stuck in these roundabouts.
So I'm going to take your example a bit. So Marni's driving around in her RV and she's working really hard to get around the roundabout. But Marni's also got just projecting a whole thing onto you, Marni. Sorry.
I love it.
But Marni's got a whole history about not being seen. And then there's a car that cuts her up on the inside and doesn't see her. And in that moment, what's really happened is Marni's just trying to concentrate on driving and someone's driving unskillfully on the inside. But Marni just explodes and she wants to murder the driver and she's shouting and she's screaming and she's giving him one finger, two fingers and everything else that's going on. I've assumed it's a male driver. It might not be. But anyway, whatever. In that moment, what's happened is all of that unprocessed stuff is exploded out.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why we wear these masks is we're trying to hide that stuff. We're terrified that someone's going to see our pain, our unprocessed stuff, or the lid's going to come off and we're going to unleash or we're going to lose control. The more that we heal, the more that we do the inner work to process, to metabolize that stuff, the more easily we can be ourselves, the more easily we can relax into just being present as our authentic self in that moment, because we're not trying to repress and hide and hold back all of this stuff. And the title of my next book next year is You Can't Heal What You Don't Feel. And so many of us have got so much unfelt stuff that we have to wear that we fear we have to wear the masks to hide all this stuff. And the more that we can process that stuff, the more that we can metabolize that stuff, the easier it becomes to just be ourselves, to just be our authentic self, warts and all, whatever that means in that moment. But that I believe is the place that we have the true potential for the emotional intimacy that also truly nourishes us, that really feeds our hearts and souls.
And that's the irony. That's where you're sort of fucked, ladies, because if you are trying to avoid feelings,
or not, as the case may be.
or not, like it's like we're living this life with these masks trying to avoid feelings, right? And then they bubble up into this blah, right? All this like catabolic cortisol, adrenaline driven, like the emotions we're trying to avoid. We're unable to create the actual feelings of love that we want. And it's just, you're not really living the full expression of yourself because you're just, like you said, the bag. Oh God, I just imagine this, like, the bag, like where, it's like a horror movie, right? Like the black bag, right? Like what's in it? And I think that's that exhaustion that everyone feels, right? Is from trying to carry it around and trying to make it look good on the outside. I love your story. You're like, first I got the fancy car, but then I thought, oh no, now I'm going to try and be another version of that and drive around the shitty car. Like, right? Like I'll do the opposite.
It's what I like to call reverse narcissism, right? It's like you go from like, I want everyone to see my sports car to like, I want everyone to see that I don't need a sports car, but it's still narcissistic, but there you go.
It's so awesome. I love you. You're so great. I was thinking, I met my husband at a personal development seminar, also called the Hoffman Process. I went for
wow, you guys, that's a deep place to meet someone.
Well, I met him. So a friend of mine went up, and I went to my friend's graduation, like the integration, the final like thing. And so I just saw my husband. I thought he was handsome and all of those things, but we met as friends. Like he of course, hit me up for other reasons, but he made it be like, oh, I just moved to Santa Monica. And I was like, oh, great, I'll show you around. And to this day, my kids are like, Mom, I cannot believe you met Jeremy, like wearing like your, like, 3 size too big Target, like army fatigue shorts, with that. I was like, I don't know. I just thought he just moved. I thought it was just a Hoffman thing, right? But it was that whole thing of like, oh, well, let's just be friends, right? And showing up with that different sort of like no expectations energy. And so when you're dating, it's like, how can you also make an amazing first impression, but be yourself like you were with your wife, right? It's like, and you can do that. You can do that in real life and you can do that online. It's just that authenticity that people want to see because that's what they connect with.
And the thing that also really comes to mind as you say that, Marni, is the realization that we there's a place for setting intention, right? And having a vision of the kind of person you want to meet. And that, I'm not trying to speak against that. But what's interesting is when I met my wife, I had all these ideas. She wasn't all of those things. She was many other things. What's interesting though is I was like, I don't want kids. Like, I'm at least not for like 10 years. I need to be completely financially set up. And I worked really hard in my 20s. So I've got to have fun in my 30s. And then I mentioned that we discovered that my wife was pregnant. And in that moment, if you'd asked me how I was going to feel before that moment, I would have said to you, oh my God, I'm going to completely freak out. My childhood was defined by my father leaving soon after I was born and not being seen again. So for me, having an unplanned child and then not being part of my kid's life was just like this total, massive trauma. Anyway, in that moment, I still can't explain it. But when we found out my wife was pregnant, I was just like, I don't understand it. Because I know my wife's looking at me like, how's he going to react? I'm like, I'm a yes. I don't understand how and why. I just trust that I knew I loved her. And I knew that I really loved her. And I knew that she was someone to spend my life with. And I just trusted that was the truth of the moment. And, we've now been together 11 years. We've had 3 kids. The second and third were a deliberate plan. And it's like the greatest blessing of my life is my relationship, my children, my family life. But if it had been left up to me, I would have screwed it up.
I love that. Oh my God. That's amazing.
Screwed it up because I would have been like, oh, I'm not ready to have kids. And I really respect that that's what you want. But it's not with me. And maybe I would have So there's also a place where we have to trust grace. We have to trust that life's wisdom. And that doesn't mean that if you fall pregnant with the wrong person, you should stay with them. That's not the point I'm making. It was just in this instance, and I can't explain why, I just knew in my heart that this was what was meant to be. And I trusted that. And 11 years later, it's still confirmed that was what was meant to be. And so there's something about also the more that we come from a place of authenticity, the less we're in all these images and all these ideas of what should be happening and the plan that we've got for our life. Something wiser and something deeper also has the potential to lead the way.
I love this. One of our core principles is faith, right? It's like there's something bigger happening, working for you. And when we get unattached, which is some deep spiritual shit that we can talk about the next time you're on the show. Because I feel like that is that fine line, right? Of like surrender and intention. So I'll leave you all with that because I know Alex has to go and do more amazing things with more amazing people. I love everything about you and your message is so profound. And I just thank you so much for being here. Ladies, take off the mask and do it with some damn dignity. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marni.
Hey, thanks for tuning into today's show. So if being in an intimate relationship in which you feel 100% seen, heard, and accepted by a high caliber man is a priority for you right now, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit for working with me and my team at Dating with Dignity, here's what I want you to do. Just head over to DWD VIP, that's D as in dating, W, D as in dating, VIP.com, and book a call to speak with my team. We'll get on the phone with you for about 60 minutes, and you'll get crystal clear on what's stopping you from finding true love right now. We'll also take a look at what you want to create, what you want your whole life to look like when you're able to finally be fully expressed as a woman in a healthy relationship with an incredible guy. And if we can help you get from where you are right now to where you want to be, we will show you the fastest path possible that makes sense for you to do that. We help smart, successful women all over the world solve this one missing piece in their life so they can finally have it all. So to see if we can help you do the same thing, head over to DWDVIP.com. I'm Marni Batista, and let's talk soon.